Good afternoon, everyone. Commissioner Franz and your team, thank you. We appreciate the steady hand, the thoughtfulness that that goes into the work you do every day. To our state economists, I'm always appreciative of the deep dive into the data and being informed on what a household formation is now, so we can clearly understand that one. One of the chief responsibilities as governor is the safety and security of Minnesotans, also the security of their economic future and the stability of the budgeting process. I'm pleased that this forecast is good economic news for Minnesota. And as Commissioner Franz said, and be very clear about this, we can thank the people of Minnesota for that. We've got a hardworking population of entrepreneurs who understand what it means to invest and build for the future, to build resiliency into our community, and understand that get-rich-quick schemes and short-term fixes aren't the way to go, that you build deep, you build strong roots, and you build to make sure that everyone takes part in that economy. As you heard, we are one of the few states in the upper Midwest whose domestic folks input or influx into our economy. It's because they know not only is this a state that works, this is a state that values everyone. This is a state with a quality of life and living standards second to none. But as some of you have heard me say this, we've got a lot of data points of measure. A while back, one of those that I was very proud of is they ranked states and asked people in each state to rank their happiness level. Minnesota ranks second of all the 50 states, behind Hawaii. So we're not certain we'll catch them, but it means something. It means something. Minnesota's economy is working because Minnesotans are working, and it's working because we've made smart budgeting decisions. We've been disciplined. We've kept our eye on the long term and invested in the things that make our state grow. This last legislative session, we invested in our children's education. We protected Minnesota's access to affordable health care, and for the first time in nearly 20 years, 1.36 million middle-class Minnesotans will see a tax rate cut. Clearly, this responsible approach to budgeting does work. We're in a healthy economic position, and we need to protect that. We must think to the future. We must ensure Minnesotans are in the best position possible to weather whatever economic uncertainties may come our way. We need to think about and budget for the next generation, not just the next year. That means exercising caution and continuing to protect our fiscal stability. As history has shown us anything, much will change between now and when we gather in February. That means that we need to make sure that those budget reserves are healthy. And I want to thank everyone in Minnesota. I want to thank the foresight of the legislature in 2014, Governor Dayton's team, Commissioner Franz, who has ushered this through the entire time, for hitting the statutory reserve goal for the first time. That must remain stable. That makes us the gold standard among states. It helps us keep our AAA bond rating. It makes it so that we can borrow at the lowest rates, and it brings stability and confidence to businesses and Minnesotans to know that we're there, to know that those essential services and the things that grew this economy will not be pulled out from under them, that we will not sell our children short. We will not drive out people out of the healthcare market so that family finances collapse, and they don't have the capacity to see that you saw in some of the slides, consumer confidence is up because they can have some security in knowing those things are there. It also means continuing to drive the economy by protecting our state's infrastructure and doing what you heard Commissioner Franz talk about and we've been talking about for the year that we've had the privilege to be governor. Investing in the capital investments and the things that build our economy is absolutely critical. It is fiscally irresponsible to allow our infrastructure, whether that be water infrastructure, state's higher education infrastructure, in our communities, roads and bridges, transit. Those are the things that are the building blocks that lead to strong economic growth and opportunities for Minnesotans. So in the coming legislative session, we will have that discussion. We will work together to get that robust bonding bill. And as you heard the commissioner say, we're out looking at these projects. And if you want to see civic pride, when we go to these communities, the Chamber of Commerce is there, the mayors are there, local officials are there, legislators are there, collectively talking about why it matters to invest in these local projects, why those investments in higher ed make a difference to them. And I was in Lake Crystal yesterday, and again, another really smart program, our Rural Financing Authority that we have, we're able to bond to that for some of our beginning farmers and ranchers. So I was out at Brent's place. This is somebody who went to college at the University of Minnesota, decided to work in finance, and was living in Minneapolis. And this is the story he said. He said a bus came by one winter day and he smelt the exhaust from it, and it reminded him of the combine and growing up. And he remembered why he thought that was such a great lifestyle. He's back on his farm, bought his uncle's farm, and is looking to expand. He point blank told us on Tuesday, without that capacity that was put into that Rural Finance Authority through the Department of Agriculture, he wouldn't have done it. He wouldn't have made that move. Now you've got a strong family living in Lake Crystal, buying their meat in Vernon Center at the meat market, buying their furniture in Mankato, and growing the area. Those are the things we need to think about. And it means making strategic and intentional investments in the things that create opportunity for all Minnesotans, especially those who feel left behind in this strong economy. Let's be very clear. If you travel anywhere in Minnesota and being in that farm in Lake Crystal or being up in East Grand Forks, our ag economy is hurting. Our neighbors are not enjoying the fruits of a prosperous economy or a stable budgeting cycle, and we need to think about that. We also need to recognize that as winter is upon us, the number of unsheltered Minnesotans has doubled over the last year. It's up to 1,653. That's about 300 children that are unsheltered. That doesn't mean homeless. That means unsheltered living in the winter. And those are things that we need to ensure that happens. And we need to ensure that our well-qualified workforce and those pathways to careers and those pathways to a strong economy are made available. You saw the slide up here that shows we have the highest labor participation rates amongst the top 2 states in the country. Our folks are working, but there's job openings. We need to make sure that we're planning for that and that we're investing in it, because one Minnesota means everyone has the opportunity to thrive. To do this, Minnesotans who are heading out to play hockey this year knows that. You don't go to where the puck is, you go to where the puck's going to be. We know what the future economy is going to look like. We know the investments we need to make. We know the changes that will happen in our energy economy, and this gives us the opportunity to think strategically about that. I look forward to once again working with the legislature this session to make this a reality. I want to be very clear. When you go to the rating agencies, and Commissioner Franz talks to me about this, one of the things that they're looking for, is there a belief and is there proof that state government can function? Can state government function in a downturn? And can state government function on the very basic things we're supposed to be able to do? And I know we've got legislative leaders in the room. I see Senator Gazelka. I believe Speaker Hortman is traveling for business. I think Leader Winkler is here. This is not easy stuff to do, but the legislature and this administration worked together to make those investments. Neither one got everything they wanted. We have ideological differences on how we believe we can accelerate this growth and expand it to more Minnesotans, but we did not allow the politics to stop us from doing what was right. Balancing a budget, creating that statutory cap on the rainy day funds, giving Minnesotans the investments into their schools, into their health care, into their institutions, giving them a tax cut when it made sense to do so in a responsible manner, and looking to the future of what we can do. Those are all positives. Those are all things that play into what the future looks like. When people and businesses start thinking about a place where they're going to live, stability, economic growth, opportunities for all, a place that's welcoming, and a stability to understand that we're not going to tolerate government shutdowns. We're not going to tolerate and have petty political fights that stop a state from doing what they do best. And so with that, I look forward to this next legislative session. I look forward to us having a robust debate on all of the issues that are impacting Minnesotans. I think that this allows us from opportunities for everyone to bring some bold ideas forward about what we can do to ensure this goes forward. And the one thing is that we know when a state is strong, when any organization works, it's not about one person taking credit. It's about working together for a common goal. So to the people of Minnesota, thank you. To the legislators, to the folks who brought these ideas in, to state employees who work on this, and to entrepreneurs creating jobs in the private sector. All of those things came together to create a healthy economy, one with growth potential in there, and one that values those things that Minnesotans care so deeply about. Inclusion for all, opportunity to work hard and get ahead for that, and give our children the best state in the country to live in. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
If property values continue to rise, property taxes go up, there's more of a surplus, good time for another tax cut?
Well, I think we look at everything as the situation comes up. I've made this very clear, just to be certain. Minnesotans spoke very clearly this past November across the state in hundreds of bond referendums, almost to the point of 90%. When Minnesotans were asked to go and cast a vote to raise their property taxes to invest in their children, they overwhelmingly said yes. I've made the case that that becomes harder to do, especially for greater Minnesota schools, and that we should think about how does that funding formula, how do we go and take a deep dive and a look at that? Commissioner Ricker's out there trying to do that, and that is one of the drivers in communities. Other drivers are when the city of Duluth, when we can't pass a transportation bill, they needed to pass one on an additional sales tax to try and deal with their streets. So I think what the answer here might be is there a more equitable, fair way that we can deliver on those to make sure that we're not leaving some parts of the state behind? Because why I do celebrate that 90% of those bonding referendums passed, think about the damage in the 10% where they didn't. That these are catastrophic decisions, especially in greater Minnesota schools, that I think we can think about. So I'm certainly willing. I certainly think as we compromised that we made sure the provider tax and the healthcare access fund stayed in place, but we did an income tax cut that we agreed on together on that it looked like the time was right. The numbers supported that, and legislators voted for it, and I signed it into law. We're willing, let's take a look. Let's work together. Let's have that same spirit of working together to try and find that. But I do think this issue on property taxes is one that the legislature should take a look in, because you can say, oh, I didn't raise taxes. We didn't do a single thing. And then your local community's having to pass a bonding referendum to keep the rain from leaking into their local school. That's a little bit of cognitive dissonance there that I'm willing to have that conversation.
Governor, what's your appetite for broadly tax cuts, and specifically one Republican leader said it's time to fully repeal the provider tax now?
The provider tax? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not happening. So really, at this point in time of this is where we're at, and understanding that all of the economists and what all of the greater Minnesota healthcare providers and the Minnesota Hospital Association said, and the catastrophic impact that would have both on families and the delivery, no, I'm certainly not going to attribute that to the entire Republican caucus, but no. But I've said again, if there's anything I've proven in a year, I am willing to work with people and compromise. Again, as much as it may pain some people to say this, that it took a Democratic governor to get an income tax cut for the first time in 20 years. That is working together. And those were proposals that were brought forward by people. So no, I'm sure those kind of comments will be made, but I think there is a rational approach to this. The one thing is I think Minnesotans by nature are a bit conservative on long-term financial stability, and I'm going to thank all of them. That vision of putting in the rainy day fund, sticking to it, statutorily putting that there, that's good government. That's good stuff, and I'm certainly not going to risk that. And again, we had that debate this last session. I think now we're probably focused a little bit more on those capital improvements and bonding. What else?
So just to be clear, are you open-minded to other tax cuts?
I'm always open-minded, and I have stated that and that those are discussions that need to happen. I certainly think it's poor leadership and disingenuous to shut the door on everything. But in that case, I'm not going to give anybody any false hope. Do not talk about the provider tax this year. It's not going to happen.
I think a lot of people hearing this headline, on the radio or on TV will think, I don't have a surplus in my bank account. I don't have a surplus in my family's bank account. What am I going to get out of this? Are we paying too much? What message do you have about what this means and what people might get out of it?
Yeah, what it means is that we made good economic decisions. Now, as a percentage of the budget, that getting it that close, and you saw the statutory being in statutory balance, meaning that we are taking in more than we're spending, that number is very, very close. And while this happened again last year at this time, we went from 1.3 down to 800 between now and February. And the one thing is, Commissioner Franz talks about this, you've heard me talk about this, the legislators know I'm going to bring this up, and they may come up here and tell you that is never going to happen, and that's their prerogative. I think we need to have an honest discussion about what inflation does to budgets. Just to be very clear, where we stand right now, at 2.1% CPI coming in, that erases the entire the 1.3 billion. So what I would tell Minnesotans is that we need to be fiscally responsible. They are receiving a tax cut come April. 1.3 million Minnesotans, over 80%, are going to see that, and that we need to strike this accordingly. The one thing I would say is that when we invest properly, they're going to see a well-qualified workforce. We're going to make sure we keep healthcare costs reasonable, and I think last time there was a compromise on that. We went with the Healthcare Access Fund and the provider tax, and we went with reinsurance. I don't think either side was particularly happy with the outcome on either one, but for Minnesota families, I think there's very little doubt that it kept holding that down. So I think what I would tell them is there's a little bit of extra in the checking account, but there's things that can come. We put away a rainy day fund. We did not, and I think it's to be clear on this, we did not raise taxes on that. We kept the tax in place on the provider tax and cut income tax. So I think to tell them is we're in a solid space. We're certainly open to looking at ways to make sure, because I think there can be an argument to be made. If we are collecting more and they're not getting a bang for their buck, they should be concerned. I think what this shows is with an influx of people coming in, with a strong economy, with personal incomes rising, with business startups starting to grow, we're making the things that make sense. So I think we're hitting that spot about right on.
Governor, what are some of your top priorities for one-time spending?
Well, it may be a little early to talk about that. I'm focused on this bonding tour. I'm focused on thinking about what's a responsible number there to service that debt. I think there have been some suggestions brought up on some of the one-time spending. I'm open to that, and I think it probably makes sense. We've done that before to do some of that, and that's probably where we will have some of the things that we will put out as we will see that maybe don't fit in bonding, that maybe are small enough to fit into that. But I wait for the legislatures. They'll bring good ideas. And this is where there's real strength in this. Local legislators will be really in tune to where one-time spending makes sense.
$29 million in overpayments, should that come out of this surplus? Should the state pick that up and pay the federal?
Yeah, and that's a statutory issue about certainly we repay the federal government. As you know, the federal government repaid us $90 million. We pay them $100. We are committed to making sure that accounting is tight, it's accountable. I would encourage the legislature to take a look at that. I think if I was the legislature, though, I would tie that hand in hand to making sure the changes they want to see and we want to see at DHS are happening. And it seems to make sense because we know whether it be unemployment rates, whether it be social determinants of health outcomes, whether it be graduation rates, our indigenous communities are suffering some of the hardest downturns in those. And I think there's some things that we can do. And certainly the money that went to them was used, especially in the treatments, the addiction treatments. But to now go back and ask them to come back with that, I would suggest to the legislature, if there's something we can work out on that, we should do that.
Does this allow the state to then kick in a little bit more on an insulin assistance program, perhaps, to get this thing unstuck? Does the surplus allow that?
Well, let's just be very clear. The amount that we're talking about was not stuck because the state didn't want to kick in on that. I've said let's find a compromise, that we had the capacity to do that. We had the capacity to do it in May. That this is the question that needs to be asked is, why are the manufacturers unwilling to come talk in public, and why are they unwilling to put anything forward that might do that? Now, I don't want to rain on that parade, but I'm not going to allow my frustration to go a little bit unheeded here, that now is the time. Yes, we can fix that. We can work on that a little bit. And I have never said that the state should not do anything. There was a House proposal. There was a Senate proposal. I asked them to figure out, is there a middle ground between them? And I'm waiting. I'm waiting for an answer. So yes, I think that might make sense some one time.
Last question. How big a bonding bill?
Well, I think the commissioner answered it right. And I want to be very clear. It's certainly not from dodging on the answer. I think the will of this isn't my decision to make alone. The Senate will have a say in this. The House will have a say in this. And the thing about the bonding bill is the minority in the Senate will have a say in this, and the minority in the House will have a say in this. I proposed 1.27 last year. I think it's, as Commissioner Franz said, it's based on the needs. 5.3 billion came in requests. We know we're at about 19 billion and growing on infrastructure, especially highways and bridges. We know what it's going to cost to service that, so we have to be responsible. I think the number he gave was $180 million to service a $2 billion bonding bill, but I think something Commissioner Friend says, and it's something this administration feels strongly about, it has to do with what those projects are, what's in there. I think we're getting a fairer system of triaging these in terms of using a rubric to rank them, letting local communities feel good about them. And then what I'm hoping comes out of this is a little more stability in, okay, we can't do all 5.3 billion. I will give that as an answer to you, Dave. We're not going to do 5.3 billion. With that being said, that need is still there. What does that look like in the future? How do we start planning for that? And how do we reach a reasonable compromise number that gets us there? So I would expect, I guess maybe that gives you the parameters. It will be between 1.27 billion and 5.3 billion, somewhere in between there. So with that, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.